of life. The Todd Starnes Commentary.
Senior Master Sergeant Philip Monk is a 19-year veteran of the Air Force. He has an impeccable record, twice named First Sergeant of the Year. But yesterday, Sergeant Monk was relieved of his duties and demoted, punished because he disagreed with his lesbian commander on gay marriage. The commander wanted Sergeant Monk to, quote, lop the head off of an instructor who told trainees that he thought homosexuality was a sin. When the sergeant suggested a lesser punishment, she demanded that he reveal his personal views on homosexuality. He refused to do so and was fired. Sergeant Monk tells me Christians are being robbed of their dignity and respect, and those who oppose gay marriage are now in violation of Air Force policy. He says the military is, in essence, bringing homosexuals out of the closet and stuffing Christians inside. I'm Todd Starnes.
Political correctness and speaking and inciting and preaching the gospel are not compatible. And bottom line, what looks like now is we're having the pendulum swing toward political correctness winning. There are consequences for that. Great report. Thank you very much, Todd Starnes. We also have some other information about the military, and we're doing some background work in regard to what is happening with same-sex couples and a host of things in that regard. So we'll bring you that a little later. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. We now go to our good friend, Pastor Aaron Fruh, co-author of the book, 2-Minute Warning. And Pastor Aaron Fruh, Aaron, great to be with you. A lot to get to. I want to open this up with the president speaking, 2 clips from the president. And we're going to go clip number 9, addressing this morning the violence in Egypt. Roll it.
Given the depths of our partnership with Egypt, our national security interests in this pivotal part of the world, and our belief that engagement can support a transition back to a democratically elected civilian government, we've sustained our commitment to Egypt and its people. But while we want to sustain our relationship with Egypt, our traditional cooperation cannot continue as usual when civilians are being killed in the streets and rights are being rolled back. As a result, this morning we notified the Egyptian government that we are canceling our biannual joint military exercise, which was scheduled for next month. Going forward, I've asked my national security team to assess the implications of the actions taken by the interim government and further steps that we may take as necessary with respect to the U.S.-Egyptian relationship.
Okay, so we're suspending that. We look at the money situation, and we'll get to that, Aaron, in a second. I want to get these two in conjunction. Now he will address the human rights abuses. And, of course, as we know, the people on the receiving end and the lion's share of abuse, specifically coming from the Muslim Brotherhood, has been and continues to be Christians. Roll it.
And to the Egyptian people, let me say the cycle of violence and escalation needs to stop. We call on the Egyptian authorities to respect the universal rights of the people. We call on those who are protesting to do so peacefully and condemn the attacks that we've seen by protesters, including on churches. We believe that the state of emergency should be lifted, that a process of national reconciliation should begin, that all parties need to have a voice in Egypt's future, that the rights of women and religious minorities should be respected, and that commitments must be kept to pursue transparent reforms of the Constitution and democratic elections of a parliament and a president.
Let's get specific. Muslim Brotherhood is why we're here today in Egypt and seeing what we are seeing. Bottom line, face it, trace it, and deal with it. As Stuart Smalley would say, I did a little correction there for him. Bottom line, Muslim Brotherhood, we've gotten the outside perspective of what they are, who they are, and their history, their outline of what they intend to do. Yet you have a keen insight that many of us do not have a connection to, and that is because your aunt and uncle are missionaries to Egypt. And the question for you is, how were they treated, and how are Christians treated by the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt? What is their experience with the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, Crane, my uncle is Egyptian, and he was born and raised in Asut, Egypt, which is the cradle of evangelicalism. It's also the cradle of the Muslim Brotherhood. He grew up on the street where the main mosque of the Muslim Brotherhood for Egypt is. And so his mom came to the Lord when he was a teenage young man, and she began to pray for her son, and not only that he would be born again, but that he would become an evangelist for the Lord Jesus. And so one day he was invited to church, and he and three other friends came to church, and all four young men were saved. All four today are in full-time ministry. And so this young man went to Bible school there in Egypt, and then came to America and went to seminary, and in seminary met my dad's youngest sister, my aunt, and they were married and went back to Egypt, where they started an evangelistic ministry, for the Lord. And living there for many, many years, my aunt was telling me today on the phone, I called her just to say, hey, give me an update of what's going on. And she said, living there in the cradle of the Muslim Brotherhood, they feared for their life, Crane. And every day at the daily prayers, the Muslim Brotherhood leaders would line the streets in front of their apartment. And as she was cooking dinner in the evenings, they would begin their chants. And their chants were filled with calls of hatred and destruction, not only to Christians, but to Americans. And so this is the way they lived, in constant fear, not of moderate Muslims, but of the radical Muslim Brotherhood. And our family had a special account for my aunt and uncle and their children, that if at any point their lives were in danger by the Muslim Brotherhood, that they would make a phone call, and we would send the tickets, and they would be able to escape the country. And I remember one morning my uncle called me, and my aunt's brother, and said, we just got the call, and I won't mention my aunt's name just for their own safety, but she called and said, we need the tickets, and hung up, and within a few hours at the airport, and got home safely. But this is the way that not only Christians live in fear of the Muslim Brotherhood, but moderate Muslims live in fear of the Muslim Brotherhood throughout the entire country. Was this, and if you can't tell me, that's fine, tell us, that's fine, but was it in the last few years that they have had to come back? Yes. Okay. And post-election? This is before Morsi was elected. Okay. And there was a lot of religious persecution. Mubarak kept things for Christians pretty safe, but in a lot of the different cities across Egypt, there was ongoing persecution against Christians by the Muslim Brotherhood. But now, that restraint has been removed, and I think as of today, there's been 16 churches that have been burned. Aaron, focusing in not only on the persecution that has taken place, ongoing, but now accelerated, we hear from our president and so many to say, well, the Muslim Brotherhood won the election. Were the elections fair? Well, this is what I asked my aunt and uncle today on the phone. And again, they continue to go back into the country to do their work. And they're very connected. His mom and dad still live there. His sisters and brothers, he has 3 brothers that are in business in Cairo. And so our country here, from our media, we're not getting the full story, Crane, of what's actually happened. And our president keeps calling this a fair and democratic election of Morsi. But however, according to my aunt and uncle, they said this was nothing like a fair election. And of course, the country was weakened economically. Mubarak was building palaces. He was misusing a lot of funds. The student intellectuals rose up. They wanted democracy, which was their right. The U.S. supported that uprising. And then, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood ran for the election as well, but they only won by 12 million people. And this is in a country of about 85 million people. And what happened was the Muslim Brotherhood, if you would vote for them, they would supply you eggs and food. And they said, if you're not voting for the Muslim Brotherhood, we will beat you. So stay at home. Don't come to the voting booths. And after he was elected, there were 30 million people. And again, in a country of 85 million, that's a lot of people. 30 million people were protesting in the street against this election because they did not feel that it was fair. They felt that it was staged. And immediately after taking office, he canceled the Constitution. He dismissed the Parliament. There was gas shortages, food shortages. And then he began to order the random killing of Christians and any opposition in the streets. And I'm wondering why our president today, is saying that we're removing all aid from Egypt and protesting the military's crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood. Why didn't he crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood over the last year as they were randomly killing and persecuting Christians?
Well, it's an excellent question. And we certainly have a worldview of President Obama that doesn't believe that America's been the great liberator, that believes that the violence and hatred toward the West, and specifically America, is because we have Gitmo, or that we have dealt with autocratic dictators and at the expense of the people of those countries. And that has been the charge. Yet, as you've just talked about, Mubarak, certainly not a person who was representing the people in the most democratic way, and that's an understatement. But there was always the tension between the Islamists and the nationalists, and we've seen that play out. And the Islamists got in, and that being the Muslim Brotherhood. Now that the military has stepped in, the question becomes, where do we go from here? On the flip side of the break, my question to you is this turning into a Christian versus Muslim conflict? And if so, will we see it spread throughout, way beyond the borders Egypt holds? Aaron Fruh is our guest. We'll ask that question, and then we'll go to the prayer for those to come to Christ. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.